The mall was busy that afternoon, filled with the usual hum of chatter, footsteps echoing against the polished floors, and the faint smell of food courts mixing with the scent of perfume and fresh coffee. Children ran past, parents called after them, and shoppers moved in a constant rhythm, unaware of the small moments unfolding around them. In the center of the main hall, near a cluster of seating, stood a piano. It was an old piano, the kind that had seen better days, with a few scratches and slightly chipped keys. But it had been maintained well enough for anyone to play. People often passed it without a second thought, some tapping a few keys, others not noticing it at all. Among the crowd that afternoon, a young girl appeared. She was quiet, her steps careful, almost tentative, as if she didn't want to draw attention to herself. Her clothes were simpler, plain shirt, slightly worn jeans, scuffed sneakers, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that wasn't obvious at first glance. People barely noticed her at first. She was just another face moving through the sea of shoppers. But she had a purpose, a destination that was clear only to her. She stopped in front of the piano and paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Her eyes were calm, and she seemed to observe everything around her with a sense of awareness that went beyond sight. Some people glanced at her and then quickly looked away, thinking she was just another person curious about the piano. Others whispered among themselves, some speculating that she might be lost or confused. A mall staff member approached, asking if she needed help, but she shook her head gently, indicating that she knew exactly what she was doing. She rested her hands lightly on the keys, feeling the texture of the worn white and black surfaces. Her touch was delicate, almost reverent, as if she were greeting an old friend. People around her began to notice a difference, though they didn't understand it yet. There was a calmness in her demeanor that contrasted sharply with the busy environment. She wasn't here for attention or to entertain. She was here to connect with something deeper, something only she could feel. The mall continued around her, indifferent at first. A mother hurried past, dragging a reluctant child by the hand. A businessman walked quickly, phone pressed to his ear, completely absorbed in his conversation. Teenagers laughed loudly, oblivious to anything else. Yet in this crowded space there was a quiet bubble forming around the girl. People started to notice that her presence seemed to slow things down, even if just a little. She took a deep breath. With a gentle movement pressed a single key. The note was soft but clear. Some people stopped briefly, turning their heads, curious. She closed her eyes and let her hands rest on the keys again, feeling the smoothness, the slight resistance, the space between each key. It was as if she was listening, but not with her ears. She was listening with her hands, her heart, her entire being. Each movement of her fingers was intentional, precise, and filled with a quiet power. A few onlookers began to gather, unsure why they were drawn to her. They whispered to each other, some skeptically, some with a hint of intrigue. One man commented quietly to his companion, wondering if she was really going to play or if she was just pretending. Another woman leaned over to see if the keys were broken, confused by the stillness, expecting a loud note that never came. They couldn't yet understand that the music was already beginning. It's not in sound, but in presence. The girl's fingers moved again, lightly pressing down, then lifting. Each touch was deliberate, as though she could feel the resonance of the notes within her own body. She smiled slightly, a small, serene smile, and seemed completely absorbed in the connection between herself and the piano. She didn't glance around to see if anyone was watching. She didn't need validation. This was her moment, her space, and she treated it with the kind of respect that only comes from a deep understanding of what music can mean. The crowd around her began to grow. Some people stopped out of curiosity, some out of respect for the unusual calmness that had settled over the area. Parents hushed their children, realizing that something extraordinary was happening. A few teenagers put their phones away, sensing that this was not a moment to capture but to witness. The atmosphere in that part of the mall changed subtly, shifting from noise and movement to quiet observation. A mall worker approached again, this time more cautiously. "Are you okay?" he asked, unsure whether to interrupt or let her continue. She nodded gently, smiling in a way that communicated reassurance without words. It was clear that she was not lost, not confused, not in need of assistance. She was simply ready, and everything around her seemed to pause in acknowledgement. She pressed another key, a slightly different note this time, feeling the vibration through her fingertips. There was a rhythm forming, not loud, not overwhelming, but undeniable. People could sense it even if they couldn't hear it fully. The rhythm was gentle, inviting, pulling attention naturally toward the piano. A woman in the crowd whispered, almost to herself, that she had never seen anything like this. That the girl seemed to be creating something invisible, yet tangible. The young girl's focus was absolute. She felt the keys, the subtle weight of each one, the way they responded to her touch. Her movements were fluid, almost like water flowing over rocks, smooth and purposeful. She did not rush, did not hesitate, simply existed in this moment, fully present. Her posture, the calm set of her shoulders, the slight tilt of her head, all communicated a story that no one yet understood fully. Some people began to notice the detail in her hands, how they moved with confidence and precision. They whispered among themselves, some speculating that she must be a trained pianist. Others doubted, thinking it impossible for someone so quiet, so seemingly ordinary, to produce anything noteworthy. They didn't know her story, her struggle, the way she had learned to feel music in a world without sound. A child approached, drawn by curiosity. "Can she really play?" the child asked, pointing at the piano. The mother hushed the child, unsure how to explain, unsure even what to expect. The girl's hands rested lightly on the keys again, a small pause before she began once more. It was a pause full of intention, a quiet moment that spoke more than words could. Everyone around felt it, a subtle energy that filled the air without a sound. The girl's eyes were closed, but she seemed aware of every presence around her. She wasn't nervous, nor was she seeking approval. She simply existed in the intersection of who she was and what she loved, and it radiated outward. People began to lean in slightly, almost unconsciously, sensing that this was the beginning of something rare, something that would break the monotony of their ordinary day. Even the staff nearby stopped, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and awe. The piano, once just another object in the mall, now seemed alive, responding to her touch, her energy, her spirit. People whispered quietly to each other, noticing the change, feeling the tension in the air shift. There was no music yet that they could hear, but the air itself seemed to vibrate with expectation. The girl pressed another key, then another. This time the note was audible, soft but distinct. A few in the crowd flinched slightly, surprised by the sound, but then they listened. The note hung in the air, pure and clear, carrying a weight that seemed far beyond the small size of the instrument. People felt something stir inside them, sensed that they were witnessing the start of something extraordinary. As she continued, more people stopped to watch. Shoppers who had walked past hurried back, sensing that something unusual was happening. The piano was no longer just a piece of furniture. It had become a focal point, a center of attention. And she was the one commanding it, not with volume or force, but with presence, grace, and quiet mastery. By now whispers had spread. Some were questioning, some in awe, and some were simply silent, unsure what to make of it. The girl didn't look at them, didn't respond to their murmurs, yet she connected with them in a way that transcended sight or sound. Her hands danced lightly over the keys, feeling each note, each vibration, forming a pattern that was uniquely hers. The mall continued its usual rhythm around her, but a bubble of attention had formed. People no longer walked past without noticing. Phones were lowered, conversations paused, and eyes were fixed on the girl at the piano. It was as if she had drawn a line between the ordinary and the extraordinary, and anyone who witnessed it was now on the other side. Waiting to see what would happen next, she pressed another key. Feeling the subtle vibration travel through her fingers and up her arms, she was deaf, though no one in the crowd yet realized it. She had learned to play by feeling the music, by memorizing each note and rhythm, and by trusting her own body to guide her. Her connection with the piano was intimate, profound, and undeniable. Every movement was precise, every pause intentional, and the energy she exuded was magnetic. A few people began to whisper, realizing that there was something different about the way she played. One elderly man leaned forward, squinting, trying to see how she managed to produce such deliberate and confident notes without apparent reference. A young woman whispered to her friend, speculating that she must be trained, that someone must have taught her in a special way, but none of them yet knew the truth. The girl continued to explore the keys, pressing them lightly, then with more certainty. Each note seemed to ripple through the space, creating an almost tangible presence. People around her felt the atmosphere shift. The chaos of the mall seemed to fade into the background. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was admiration mixed with wonder, and an almost silent anticipation. Even the children nearby stopped fidgeting. A little boy leaned against his mother, eyes wide, sensing that something magical was unfolding. The mother placed her hand on his shoulder, signaling him to be still, as though the moment deserved reverence. A few teenagers, normally restless and distracted, watched in silence. Captivated by the quiet eye, the girl's fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed effortless. Each note she pressed was precise, yet carried a depth that drew people closer without them realizing it. The mall, once filled with noise and distraction, had begun to fade into the background. Conversations slowed, footsteps softened, and even the clatter of food trays seemed to dim. It was as though the piano had created a space all its own. It's a small pocket of calm in the chaos. People around her couldn't help but watch. Some leaned slightly forward, holding their breath, unsure why they felt so drawn to her playing. Others exchanged quiet glances, silently acknowledging that something remarkable was happening. Even those who initially thought she might be pretending or unsure now found themselves captivated by the subtle power of her presence. The girl didn't look up or respond to the attention. Her eyes were closed, her face calm, her body fully engaged with the piano. She felt every key under her fingers, every vibration traveling through her hands and arms. She had learned to play in this way, relying on touch, memory, and a deep understanding of the instrument. The absence of sound in her world had not been a barrier. It had been a different way of listening, a deeper connection to music that few could understand. A few children watched nearby, their curiosity overcoming any impulse to run or play. One little boy, no older than 7, tilted his head as if trying to see how she could possibly know what to do. His mother gently rested a hand on his shoulder, whispering for him to be quiet. He nodded, eyes wide, completely absorbed. A young girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing at the piano and whispering, "She's amazing." Her mother simply nodded. Feeling the same sense of awe herself, the music she imagined was vivid in her mind. A symphony of notes and emotion that she translated through her fingertips. She moved through a series of complex melodies effortlessly, each transition smooth and natural. People began to notice patterns in her playing, subtle rises and falls, rhythm that pulled at the heart without the need for words. There was a story in the music, one that spoke of quiet strength, determination, and beauty. One man in the crowd, a middle-aged office worker with a tired expression, paused in his tracks. He had been rushing through the mall, focused on errands and meetings, but now he found himself completely absorbed. The lines of stress on his face softened as he watched her play. He felt something shift inside him, a quiet reminder of simpler, more meaningful moments. He wasn't the only one experiencing this. All around, people felt an unspoken connection, an invisible thread that tied them to the girl and the piano. A few teenagers, normally restless and glued to their phones, stood silently at a distance. Their friends nudged them, whispering for them to stop staring, but they couldn't. Something in the way she moved, the care with which she pressed each key, and the calm confidence radiating from her held their attention. One whispered quietly, she's really feeling it." The words were simple, but they captured a truth everyone present could sense. The girl's movements were deliberate. She paused occasionally, letting a note linger, feeling the energy in the room and how it reacted to her touch. Though she could not hear the sounds as others did, she understood the effect her music had. She could sense the vibrations in the floor and the air, the slight shifts in energy as people leaned in, and the subtle quiet that settled over the crowd. Every gesture was intentional, part of a larger story she was telling without words. An older woman, standing near a bench, reached out to steady herself as tears formed in her eyes. She had seen many performances in her life, but there was something different here. The girl wasn't performing for applause or recognition. She was simply expressing something profound, something raw and human. The woman turned to the person next to her and whispered, "It's like she's telling a story we can all feel." The girl's hands moved with a fluidity that made each note seem inevitable. She was not rushing. There was no urgency in her playing. Instead, she allowed the music to breathe, to exist, and in doing so, she drew everyone around her into a shared experience. People instinctively adjusted their movements, leaning closer, softening their voices, even stepping around to get a better view without making noise. They were becoming part of her world, momentarily leaving behind their ordinary routines. A man in his 20s, carrying shopping bags, stopped mid-step. He had been impatient, frustrated by long lines and crowds, but now he found himself captivated. He lowered his gaze to the piano, noting the precision and intention in every movement. He realized he was holding his breath, not wanting to interrupt the delicate energy that had formed. Around him, the mall seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet focus that was impossible to ignore. The girl's face remained serene, showing no awareness of the effect she was having on those around her. Her focus was inward, connected to the piano and the music only she could feel. Yet somehow, the emotions she poured into each note were traveling outward, touching everyone who watched. People began to realize that they were witnessing something rare, not just skill, but a profound connection between a human and an instrument. A silent conversation that transcended ordinary understanding. A few security guards approached cautiously, unsure whether to intervene. They had seen many unusual situations, but this one didn't feel like trouble. One whispered to another, "Should we stop her?" The other shook his head. "No, let her be. Watch." And they did. They, too, felt the calm and the awe that had spread through the crowd. The girl continued to explore the keys. Moving through melodies that were both intricate and deeply emotional, there was a sense of familiarity in the patterns she played, a language that was at once complex and instinctive. She was telling a story without words, without sound in the way others understood it, and yet the story resonated. People began to forget the bustle of the mall, the errands and distractions, and simply watched. Immersed in the moment, a young woman standing nearby whispered to her friend, "How can she? She's deaf, isn't she?" Her friend nodded slowly, eyes wide, suddenly realizing the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. They hadn't known before, and the revelation added a layer of wonder and admiration. The girl's talent wasn't just about music, it was about determination, adaptation, and the power of human spirit. Some people felt chills as they watched her hands move. There was an intensity in her expression, a seriousness tempered by a quiet joy. Every key she pressed seemed to carry intention, as if each note had been carefully chosen to convey meaning. The energy in the room shifted again, a deeper connection forming between the girl and the crowd, though she was unaware of it. She was lost in her own world, yet simultaneously creating a shared experience for everyone present. Children were now completely still, mesmerized. A little boy pressed his face to the edge of a bench, watching her fingers with fascination. A girl beside him whispered, "She's like magic." Her mother smiled softly, sensing the truth in the words. Adults, too, felt it, an unspoken understanding that something rare was happening. It wasn't just a performance. It was a revelation. A glimpse into a world where limitations were redefined and the power of human focus and determination shone through. The girl's fingers moved faster now, navigating the keys with increasing confidence. The rhythm she created was subtle but complex, almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet felt deeply by all who watched. People around her instinctively leaned in, drawn by the motion and energy. They didn't need to hear every note to understand that this was extraordinary. The music existed in the movement, the intention, and the emotion she conveyed. A man in the crowd whispered, "I can't believe she's doing this without hearing." His friend nodded, equally awestruck, unable to tear his eyes away. Others murmured quietly, asking themselves how it was possible. Some tried to imagine the dedication and practice, that must have gone into developing such skill. The realization that she had overcome a barrier many thought insurmountable added weight to every movement. Every note, every pause. The girl's focus never wavered. She explored the keys with delicate precision, letting each note resonate through her hands and arms. She was unaware of the growing audience, the people who had stopped their own lives to witness her performance. She simply existed in the music, and through that existence, she was transforming the space around her, touching hearts without words, without sound as most understood it. By now, a small crowd had formed, people standing silently, leaning against railings, or crouching to get a better view. Phones were lowered, conversations paused, and even passers-by who were late for appointments slowed, sensing something beyond explanation. The girl's presence had created a ripple of awe, a pause in ordinary life that commanded attention. She pressed a few more keys with deliberate care, then paused briefly, feeling the vibrations travel through her body. Her face remained serene, but there was a quiet intensity, a sense that she was about to reach a moment of significance. People held their breath, sensing it too, aware that the calm and focus in the room was building toward something they would not soon forget. And so, in the middle of a bustling mall, amidst the noise and distraction of ordinary life, the girl at the piano had begun to draw people into her world. The music she could not hear still moved everyone around her, not because of volume or spectacle, but because of presence, intention, and the human ability to connect in ways that transcend ordinary understanding. She was not performing for applause or attention. She was expressing herself. And in doing so, she was creating a quiet, profound magic that everyone present could feel. Even if they could not yet fully comprehend it, the music had begun to weave a spell over them all, subtle but undeniable. People who had been wandering past, talking on phones or dragging shopping bags, now moved with hesitation, drawn toward the piano in a way that felt almost magnetic. The girl's hands glided across the keys, pressing each note with a precision that belied the challenges she faced. Her focus was absolute. Her world narrowed to the black and white keys beneath her fingers and the rhythm she could feel through her body. A small crowd had gathered, forming a semicircle around her, watching intently. Some held their breath, as if afraid to disturb the fragile connection that had formed. Others whispered softly to each other, sharing their awe in quiet tones. They spoke of her skill, her calm, her ability to create something so moving without the benefit of hearing the music. Yet, none of them could fully explain why they felt such an intense pull toward the piano, why their hearts seemed to respond to her touch. The girl's eyes remained closed. She had learned to rely on her hands, her memory, and the vibrations she could feel in her arms and the floor. Every note she pressed resonated in a way that she understood intuitively. She could feel the rhythm, the harmony, and the emotion, and she translated all of it through her fingers into the keys. To her, each note was a conversation, a story that needed no voice, no sound as others understood it. A man in his 50s, standing near the edge of the crowd, felt something stir inside him. He had been a music lover for years, attending concerts and recitals, but nothing had touched him like this. He watched the girl with wide eyes, noticing the way her hands moved, the way her body seemed to breathe with the music. He realized that what he was seeing was more than skill. It was mastery born from determination, patience, and an intimate connection to the instrument. A young woman standing beside him whispered, "She can't hear it, can she?" Her friend shook her head slowly, a mixture of disbelief and admiration on her face. "No, she's feeling it." "Can you imagine learning to play this way?" They exchanged a quiet look, both of them humbled by the realization. The girl's silent mastery made them reconsider what they thought they knew about limits and ability. Children in the crowd were completely captivated. A little girl tugged at her mother's hand, whispering, "How does she do that without hearing?" The mother simply smiled, unable to answer, realizing that some things could not be explained, only felt. The music had reached a point where it seemed to move beyond sound, into a realm of emotion and presence that everyone could sense. Whether they understood it or not, the girl's fingers danced across the keys, moving through melodies that were intricate yet natural. Each note seemed to flow into the next, creating a tapestry of emotion and rhythm that was both beautiful and compelling. People in the crowd began to notice the subtle rises and falls, the pauses that spoke as loudly as the notes themselves. The music was no longer just a collection of sounds. It had become a story, one that everyone could feel, even if they could not hear it in the way she could. A young man leaned closer, watching her hands intently. He had some experience with instruments himself, but he realized that what she was doing was on a different level entirely. The precision, the confidence, and the emotion she conveyed through touch alone was extraordinary. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense that he was witnessing something rare and profound, something that would stay with him long after he left them all. The girl's hands moved with increasing confidence, navigating the keys with ease. Her movements were fluid, almost like water flowing over stones, smooth and deliberate. She pressed each key with intention, feeling the vibration travel through her arms, connecting her to the instrument in a way that transcended ordinary understanding. The crowd seemed to sense this, leaning in, holding their breath, waiting for the next note that would carry the story forward. A mother standing nearby watched her children, who were completely still, captivated by the girls playing. She noticed the subtle expressions on their faces, the way their eyes followed every movement of her hands. It was clear that the music, or the presence of the music, was reaching them in a way that words could not. The mother felt a quiet swell of emotion, a mix of admiration and awe at the young girl's talent and focus. The girl continued, her hands moving faster now, yet never losing the clarity or precision of each note. The music was building not in volume, but in intensity and emotion. People began to lean closer, sensing that something remarkable was unfolding. The mall around them seemed to fade, replaced by the rhythm and emotion emanating from the piano and the girl herself. Every movement of her fingers seemed to carry meaning, every pause deliberate, every note part of a larger story. A security guard who had been watching from a distance stepped closer, curious despite himself. He had seen many performances, street musicians, and spontaneous events, but none had commanded attention in this way. There was a quiet authority in her playing, a presence that drew people in and held them. He couldn't explain why he felt moved, but he knew that stopping her would be wrong. Instead, he allowed himself to watch. Caught in the spell of her performance, the crowd had grown larger now. People who had been passing through the mall, drawn in by curiosity or instinct, they stopped, leaning over railings or standing quietly behind benches, all captivated by the girl's skill and the emotion she poured into each movement. Even those who did not understand music could sense the significance of what was happening, the quiet power of someone expressing themselves fully and without compromise. The girl paused briefly, letting a note linger under her fingers. She felt the energy in the room, the vibrations of the crowd, and the subtle shifts in presence around her. Though she could not hear the applause that would come, she was aware of the attention, the respect, and the awe. Each note she played carried the weight of experience, of determination, and of the human capacity to create something meaningful against all odds. A man in his 30s whispered to his companion, "She's incredible, and she can't even hear it." His companion nodded, eyes wide, feeling a sense of humility wash over him. The girl's silent mastery forced them to reconsider what they thought was possible, to acknowledge the depth of dedication and talent that could exist beyond conventional understanding. The music was building now, a crescendo that was subtle but undeniable. The girl's hands moved with increasing confidence, each key pressed with a mix of precision and emotion. The crowd sensed it, leaning in, holding their breath as if they too were part of the performance. The mall around them had faded completely, replaced by a shared experience, a collective witnessing of something extraordinary. Children were mesmerized. Adults were quiet, and even the teenagers had stopped talking. Caught in the spell of the moment, no one wanted to interrupt. No one wanted to break the fragile connection that had formed. The girl's presence and her playing had created a bubble of attention, a space where ordinary life was suspended, and something rare and beautiful could unfold. Her hands moved faster now, yet with a fluidity that made each movement seem natural and inevitable. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It had become a living expression, a story unfolding through her fingers. People felt it in their chests, a resonance that transcended sound, a connection that was deeply human. They could feel the intensity, the joy, the quiet power of someone expressing themselves fully and fearlessly. A young woman whispered to her friend, "I can't believe she's doing this without hearing it. It's unreal." Her friend nodded, eyes wide, feeling a sense of awe that left her nearly speechless. Others murmured quietly, acknowledging the truth of the statement. They had seen skilled musicians before, but this was different. This was someone overcoming an obstacle they couldn't fully comprehend, and in doing so, creating something transcendent. The girl's movements became even more expressive. Her fingers flew across the keys, pressing some notes gently, others with deliberate force, each contributing to the intricate tapestry of emotion she was creating. The crowd responded instinctively, leaning closer, holding their breath, and sharing in the experience. They could feel the music even if they could not hear it in the way she could, and that made it all the more profound. An elderly man, who had been watching quietly from a bench, felt tears form in his eyes. He had attended concerts, seen performances, and even taught music in his younger days, but nothing had touched him like this. There was a purity in the girl's expression, a connection to the piano that went beyond technical skill. It was about heart, about intention, and about the human capacity to create beauty against all odds. The girl's hands moved with a fluid, rhythmic precision. Every note she pressed, every pause she allowed, carried weight and meaning. She was telling a story without words, and everyone present felt it, understood it, and responded. The mall had become a sacred space, transformed by the quiet power of her music and the presence she radiated. People around her held their breath. As she reached the climax of her silent symphony, the tension was palpable, a shared anticipation that bound the crowd together. They could feel the energy, the intensity, and the emotion building. And they knew that what was about to happen would be unforgettable. The girl's fingers moved faster, more confidently, and yet every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. She had reached the moment where skill, emotion, and presence converged into something transcendent. And then, she pressed the final sequence of notes. The room seemed to exhale. The spell was complete. People were silent for a moment, stunned, moved, and unable to speak. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that transcended sound, that touched hearts in a way few experiences could. The girl at the piano had captured their attention, their emotions, and their admiration. Leaving everyone present changed in some small but profound way. The final note lingered in the air, subtle yet powerful, and for a moment, no one in the mall moved. The girl's hands rested gently on the keys, and her eyes remained closed. She had finished her piece, though in her mind, it had never truly ended. She felt the vibrations through her fingertips, through the floor beneath her, and in that moment, she was completely at peace. Around her, the crowd was frozen, stunned, and not entirely sure how to react. The silence was heavy, but it was a silence full of awe, of emotion, and of the realization that something extraordinary had just occurred. A few people began to clap softly, almost cautiously, as if unsure whether to break the spell that had formed. Others followed, louder now, their applause hesitant but growing quickly into a steady, appreciative murmur. The girl did not turn her head. She did not hear the claps, but she felt the vibrations through her body. A smile spread across her face, small and serene, as if she had completed a conversation only she had known existed. The energy in the room shifted, a mixture of admiration, wonder, and disbelief filling every corner. One of the onlookers, a woman in her 40s, whispered to her friend, "Do you know what's incredible? She's deaf. She can't hear any of this." Her friend's eyes widened as she realized the truth. People began to murmur quietly among themselves, realizing just how extraordinary the girl's performance had been. The realization added another layer to the awe everyone felt. This wasn't just skill. This was mastery against incredible odds, a testament to determination, patience, and resilience. The girl slowly opened her eyes and glanced around. She noticed the crowd, the expressions of amazement, and admiration on their faces, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. She had been so absorbed in the music and the connection with the piano that she had not realized how many people had stopped to watch. For a brief moment, she felt self-conscious, yet the warmth and genuine respect from the crowd reassured her. She was not performing for attention, yet attention had found her. It's unavoidable and sincere. A young boy stepped forward cautiously, his eyes wide with curiosity. How do you play like that if you can't hear?" he asked, his voice small but filled with wonder. The girl looked at him and smiled, a simple, gentle smile that conveyed understanding more than words could. She signed a few words to him, explaining that she learned to feel the music, to remember the notes, and to let her hands guide her. The boy nodded slowly, fascinated by the explanation, as if he had glimpsed a secret world he had never known existed. Other people began approaching, their questions hesitant, their admiration palpable. A man in his 30s asked quietly, "How long did it take to learn like that?" She signed in response, indicating years of practice and dedication. The man nodded, his face reflecting disbelief and respect. Everyone watching was beginning to understand that her ability was not a simple talent, it was the result of years of focus, determination, and a unique way of experiencing the world. The crowd's energy shifted from awe to genuine warmth. People began to approach her more closely, some leaving small notes of encouragement, others offering smiles and words of praise. A mother whispered to her child, "See? Nothing can stop you if you really want it." The child nodded, eyes wide, inspired in a way that went beyond music. The girl's presence, her determination, and her silent mastery had communicated something profound, even to the youngest among them. A security guard, who had initially been cautious, stepped forward with a smile. "You've amazed everyone," he said softly. Though she could not hear him, she felt the energy of his words through his kind gestures and warm smile. He offered a reassuring nod, and she nodded back in gratitude. People around her began to share their reactions quietly, some taking a moment to reflect on what they had witnessed, others expressing their awe more openly. It was clear that this had been more than a performance. It had been an experience that touched everyone present. A woman in her 50s, holding a shopping bag loosely at her side, approached carefully. "I've seen pianists perform many times, but never like this," she said softly. She glanced around, noticing the mixture of emotions on everyone's face: his astonishment, respect, and even tears. "It's not just the playing. It's the heart behind it. You can feel it without hearing a single note." The girl responded with a gentle nod, acknowledging the connection, though she could not hear the words. The sentiment was clear, and it was felt deeply by both of them. The mall seemed to have shifted in tone, as if the entire space had been transformed by her presence. People who had been rushing, distracted, or indifferent now lingered, drawn together by a shared sense of having witnessed something extraordinary. Conversations resumed, but softly, as if out of respect for what had just occurred. Even the children were calm, reflecting the wonder and awe that had settled over the crowd. A teenager, standing near the edge of the group, whispered to her friend, "Do you know what makes it even more amazing? She's deaf and still created something that moves everyone so much." Her friend nodded, the words catching in her throat as she realized the truth. The girl's ability to connect, to create, and to communicate through the piano, without the sense of hearing, added a layer of inspiration and admiration. That went beyond skill or talent. The girl's attention shifted to a man who had been watching quietly, his face a mix of admiration and disbelief. He signed a few words to her, asking how she had learned to feel the music. She smiled and signed back, explaining that she had practiced tirelessly, feeling the vibrations, memorizing the keys, and learning to trust her instincts. The man nodded, feeling a mix of humility and inspiration. It was clear to everyone around that her story was as remarkable as her performance. People began to gather around her more closely, offering encouragement, sharing smiles, and reflecting on the experience they had just shared. Some left quietly, their minds buzzing with the realization that they had witnessed something rare, something that challenged assumptions and inspired awe. Others stayed, lingering near the piano, as if reluctant to leave the space that had been transformed by her presence and skill. A mother, holding her daughter's hand, spoke softly to the girl. "You've shown us that limitations are only in our minds. You've turned something that many would see as impossible into a beautiful reality." The girl smiled gently and nodded, her expression serene and peaceful. The message was received without sound. The meaning was conveyed through presence, gestures, and the shared humanity of the moment. The crowd's admiration continued to grow. People began discussing quietly among themselves, sharing their thoughts and feelings about what they had just experienced. Words like incredible, amazing, and unbelievable were whispered repeatedly, yet none of them fully captured the depth of emotion and awe that had been stirred. The girl had communicated something profound, something that transcended music, sound, and ordinary understanding. Even the children began to process the experience, their eyes wide with wonder. A little boy whispered to his sister, "I want to be able to do something like that." She nodded, equally inspired, as they both realized that what they had witnessed was not just a performance, but a lesson in perseverance, creativity, and the power of human determination. The girl had not only played music, she had touched hearts and inspired minds across generations. The girl's serene smile remained as the applause continued. She had completed her piece, yet in her mind, the music was still alive, a story that never truly ended. The connection she had created with the piano, the crowd, and the space around her lingered, and people began to recognize that they had been part of something extraordinary. The realization that she was deaf added weight to the moment, transforming admiration into profound respect and inspiration. A man in the crowd whispered to another, "It's more than just skill. It's courage, determination, and heart." The other nodded, silent, reflecting on the truth of the statement. Everyone around them seemed to understand, even if in different ways. The girl's performance had broken barriers, challenged assumptions, and reminded everyone present of the limitless potential of human spirit and creativity. People slowly began to disperse, but the energy lingered. Conversations were quieter, more reflective, as if the mall itself had been changed by the experience. The girl packed up her belongings slowly, her movements calm and unhurried. She had given her gift fully, without expectation, and in return, she had received admiration, respect, and inspiration. The ripple of her presence would continue long after she had left the space. As she walked away, some people approached to offer final words of encouragement. They thanked her silently through gestures, smiles, and nods. The girl responded with her gentle, serene smile, acknowledging their appreciation without needing to speak. The connection was complete. Everyone involved carried a piece of the experience with them. In the aftermath, the mall seemed quieter, softer, as if reflecting the impact of the moment. People discussed what they had witnessed, sharing the story of the deaf girl who played the piano with such mastery and emotion that no one could forget. The story spread naturally, not because of spectacle, but because of the profound humanity and inspiration it conveyed. It was a reminder that talent, determination, and heart could transcend obstacles, limitations, and expectations. And so, the girl's story became more than a moment in a mall. It became a lesson, a memory, and an inspiration to everyone who had been present. Her music, silent to her ears but resonant to every heart around her, had left an indelible mark. She had shown the world that true connection, true expression, and true talent come not from circumstance, but from perseverance, passion, and the courage to embrace one's own unique way of experiencing life.